And good morning, everyone. Happy Thursday morning to you, and welcome back to Morning Musings. My name is Don K. Preston. I'm the president of Preterist Research Institute of Ardmore, Oklahoma. And I do so much appreciate you being with me here as I continue my investigation of the Olivet Discourse. I understand that this study has gone on a good little bit. Now, here's what I'm thinking, okay? I am sort of kind of thinking about for the next study, and this has been suggested to me by several different people, and I'm sort of kind of thinking about examining the eschatology of the parables of Jesus. Because, look, I am absolutely convinced that a proper examination and exegesis of Jesus' parables 100% confirms the truth, the validity of covenant eschatology. And maybe the good side of that, I don't know, it depends on your perspective, I guess, would be the fact that it won't go 530 or 540 videos, okay? Look, I got to tell you how much I've enjoyed this series, though, and we're not through with the Olivet Discourse, but nonetheless, I've just thoroughly enjoyed this. Okay, got to get into it. We are examining Matthew chapter 16, 27 and 28 in light of the use of the terminology of the coming of the Son of Man. We are doing so because that terminology, the coming of the Son of Man on the clouds of heaven with power and great glory, etc., is taken directly from Daniel chapter 7, 13 and 14. Look, I don't know of hardly any scholars who deny that. So my point is this. If the coming of the Son of Man in these New Testament references, the coming of the Son of Man on the clouds of heaven with power and great glory, etc., if that is a direct reference and allusion to, citation of Daniel chapter 7, 13 and 14, then that means the New Testament writers are applying Daniel 7, 13 and 14, not to Jesus' ascension at all. They are applying it to his coming in judgment. And furthermore, since they use that terminology in contexts that are absolutely, definitively, temporally delimited, meaning saying that it would be fulfilled within a given, very specific temporal context, then you and I have no right to say, as many people try to say, Kenneth Gentry tries to do it, John Middleton tries to do it, host of commentators, amillennial and postmillennial as well. They like to go to passages like Matthew 16, 27, 28. Well, there's no question this was fulfilled in AD 70, but that was a type and a shadow of the real coming of the Lord. No, it's not. The New Testament writers, not one time, say, indicate, hint, suggest, imply, or infer that the coming of the Lord that was to occur in their generation was a mere type and a shadow of anything else. Not one word. So the burden of proof lies squarely on those who would like to say, well, certainly we have a fulfillment of Daniel 7, 13 and 14 in the judgment of Jerusalem in AD 70. That is the coming of the Son of Man in the glory of the Father with his angels in judgment. Yeah, that was fulfilled in AD 70. Oh, but there's an ultimate fulfillment. No. Prove it. Prove it. Okay. I mentioned to you that years and years ago, I had always taken Matthew 16, 27 as, quote, end of the world, unquote. I never doubted that. It's what every preacher that I heard taught. It's what every commentator that I had taught. Now, mind you, I didn't have but a tiny handful of commentators, and they were all Church of Christ commentators. Because at the time, you see, I believed that nobody taught any truth except Church of Christ people. That's how biased and prejudiced I was. I got over that. But nonetheless, It was when I began to actually think for myself, instead of just blindly and like a sheep repeating what I was reading and hearing, even though I admired the people that I was listening to and reading. I always thought they were great scholars. So one day I picked up, as I always do, I have my Greek text laying in front of me at all times. Now, I'm not a Greek scholar, don't claim to be a Greek scholar, never have claimed to be a Greek scholar. But I know how to use the lexicons, I know how to use the grammars, I know how to use the critical commentators who do know the Greek. Pardon me. So one day I was looking at Matthew 16:27 and 28, and I realized that verse 28. Now, mind you, I had already begun to see that Matthew 16:27 was saying something that I had never been prepared to realize or to accept, and that is that Jesus said he was going to come in the glory of the Father. I'm going to talk about that next week. But I already realized that Matthew 16:27 was a challenge to my personal beliefs. But as I read the Greek of Matthew 16:28, I realized that the very first of the verse, Jesus said, Amen, lego Humin, which is translated variously as assuredly I say to you, or verily, verily I say to you. And I was going, everybody tells me, all of my theological heroes tell me, all of my commentaries, limited as they were, tell me verse 28 is different from, radically different from, temporally and subject-wise, from verse 27. Well, if that's true, then there ought to be an indication grammatically in verse 28 that it's different from verse 27. So I wanted to know if that little term, amen, lego Humin, was indicative grammatically of a break in subject, of an introduction of a new subject. Now, mind you, this was well before the days when I had such a thing as a computer. And so I set out to investigate. I drug out my Strong's Exhaustive Concordance. You know, big book like that. Many people today don't even know what a Strong's Exhaustive Concordance is, unless they've got it on their iPhone or something. So anyway, I just went down through every single occurrence. Now, is it possible I missed some? Well, yeah, it's possible. But I can assure you I did not purposely overlook or omit or overlook any occurrence of the term amen, lego Humin. And here's what I found. Point number one, the term is used some 95 times in the New Testament. And I want you to catch the power of what I'm about to say. Not one time does it break the subject of a discussion. Not one time does it introduce a new discussion. Amen, lego Humin, is invariably used when the writer or the speaker is going to call attention to what he is about to say, that is going to emphasize what he just said. Let me say that again. Amen, lego Humin, is used to call attention to what is about to be said that will emphasize what has just been said. Some years ago, I had a formal public debate with Professor David Hester of Faulkner University in Montgomery, Alabama. And I made that point, and he got up and he said, "Oh, Preston says Amin Lego Humin never breaks a subject, never introduces a new subject." Well, in John chapter 3, Jesus is talking to Nicodemus, and they're talking about, the kingdom and what have you. And Jesus said, "Verily, verily, I say unto you, unless you are born of water and the Spirit, you will not enter the kingdom." I say, see, it breaks the subject. And I sat there literally stunned at his desperation. Now, let me make a hermeneutical point right here. I'm constantly amazed. This is true when I reviewed the book by Kyle Pope. And he would go to a passage in which the word all is used. And he knew if he used the word all, it would destroy his doctrine, such as in Daniel chapter 12 and verse 7. So what does he do? He runs and he finds some places where, by everyone's admission, all does not mean all. So in other words, he would find a passage with an exceptional use of all, panta in the Greek, and say, okay, look, Preston, look over here. All cannot mean all over here. Therefore, it can't mean all in Daniel 12. Ladies and gentlemen, that's a corrupt hermeneutic. That is what you call illegitimate totality transfer. That is ripping a definition out of one context and imposing it arbitrarily without justification on another context. That is a logical fallacy. So, the application of that is this. Let me say, just for argument's sake, it's not true, it's not valid, not accurate, but let us just assume for a moment that David Hester was right. He's not. But let's assume that David Hester was right in claiming that John 3:3-5 uses Amin Lego Humin in a distinctive way. It uses it not to introduce something that is about to be said that will emphasize what is just said, but in fact to introduce a new subject. Would that prove that is not how it's being used in Matthew 16:28? Well, no, it wouldn't prove anything. These are two totally different contexts, ladies and gentlemen. So the hermeneutic that says, hey, I know a word, term, or phrase, it can be used predominantly in all of these other passages, but by George, I found an exception to the rule. So that negates the regular use of that word, term, or phrase. Let me say again, that is an absolutely corrupt hermeneutic. And therefore, the burden of proof falls on those who would deny that Amin Lego Humin in Matthew 16:28 is introducing what is about to be said to emphasize what has just been said. Does it really mean that? It's their responsibility to prove an exceptional use of Amin Lego Humin. Unable to prove that Amin Lego Humin does not mean pay attention to what I'm about to say, because I'm about to emphasize what I just said. If they cannot prove that, ladies and gentlemen, here's what that means. Jesus said, the Son of Man will come in the glory of the Father with his angels and reward every man according to his works. And verily I say unto you, some standing here will not taste of death until they see the Son of Man coming in his kingdom. In other words, with his angels and in the judgment of all men, before they all died. Now, here's the point. We're told that Matthew 25:14, the return of the absent master, is in fact Matthew 16:27. That's the predominant interpretation of Matthew 16:27. And we are told Matthew 16:27 is Acts chapter 1, the return of Christ. But we're told that Acts chapter 1 is the fulfillment of Daniel 7. Well, wait a minute. Matthew 16:27 is predicting the fulfillment of Daniel 7, the coming on the clouds of heaven with the angels. But Matthew 16:27 is the time of the coming of the Son of Man in judgment of the persecutors of his apostles. And it would be in that first century generation. And listen, I've got to take enough time next week to drive this point home in Matthew 16:27 and 28. In the meantime, thank you so much for joining me for this morning's Morning Musings. Next week, be looking for the very special book special. And don't forget, if you got an idea, if you got a book package that you would like for me to offer at a great discount, be sure to let me know before next week, and I'll give it some consideration, see what kind of, count the pennies and all that kind of stuff like that. In the meantime, thanks again for joining me. You have a safe weekend. God bless. See you on Monday.